cultural organizations that are often in front of you. Thank you very much.
Nikki Ashton, 2.5 minutes, please. Nikki.
OK, merci beaucoup. Je pense une grande...
Thank you. I think that a lot of what's been proposed today is support for broadcasters, francophone broadcasters, especially, well, throughout the country, but recognizing their importance in OLMCs.
Particularly around the question of challenges that smaller local broadcasters face, not specific to the francophone context, but more broadly. CHTM AR Radio here in northern Manitoba performs a essential service in the radio services they provide. They are, they are community radio in what is largely a media desert. And in fact, just recently when wildfires burnt down the fiber optic cables to Flin Flon, one of our major centers, everybody was getting their news about fires, possible evacuations, etc., from AR Radio, part of the CHTM AR network. But they have been clear about some of the challenges they face, particularly around CanCon. They get a lot of their music from services such as DMDs, that usually provide MAPL data, but it's left to them to decide, based on the 3 categories, if it fits the list, et cetera, which I'm sure you can appreciate for a small radio station that is doing essential work can be quite taxing. And so one of the things that they've raised is challenges with respect to the CRTC data. And I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be better for stations across Canada to have access to the exact database that the CRTC works with, instead of having small radio stations expend resources they don't have, capacity they don't have, trying to guess if a song was made by a Canadian artist, recorded in Canada, et cetera,
22 seconds.
And if I can leave that with you.
15 seconds. I think your point is extremely well taken. 2 of the pieces of work we're looking at now is how to reduce the administrative burden on radio stations, because we do think that perhaps it has grown greater than it should be. Secondly, we're looking at possible solutions for a database of Canadian content, so that we can offer a solution. These aren't done yet, and of course, the government's record on making sure it has databases and technological solutions that roll out seamlessly is not perfect, but it is something we see as a priority. We know that radio stations need help, and we do see them, as you so eloquently put it, as being absolutely key and core to communities, especially with community newspapers across Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Shortliff. I want to thank the members very much, or the witnesses, for coming in and sharing some of your wisdom with us. And Today we are meeting our second round of witnesses on the bill. Sorry, everyone. I am just a little punchy. I did not sleep at all last night because I came in on a red eye. And so I sometimes don't even know what I'm saying right now. So we're having witnesses on Bill C-354. And I will introduce the witnesses. They are Fédération culturelle canadienne française, Manon Henri Cadeau, Director of Strategy and Government Relations, Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes du Canada, Leanne Roy, President by video conferencing, and Serge Kinty, Director of Communications. Please begin now. Just quickly, you have 5 minutes to present, but it's only per group, so that the Fédération des communautés francophones will have only 5 minutes, and Manon will have 5 minutes. So I want to thank you for coming, and please begin. We'll begin with Manon Henri Cadeau. For 5 minutes, please. Ms. Cadeau.
Merci.
Thank you. Dear members of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage, Madam Chair, members of the committee, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me to appear before you today. My name is Manon Henri Cadeau, and I'm the Director of Strategy and Government Relations for the Fédération culturelle canadienne française, FCCF. As a reminder, the FCCF is the political voice of arts and culture in the Canadian and Acadian Francophonie on the national scene. Our organization exercises its leadership in the broadcasting file in frank collaboration and with the support of the FCCF. Active and visible since the Yale Report, and then on subsequent bills, the FCCF has contributed to highlighting the particular context, as well as the specific issues and needs of minority Francophone communities. We are deeply involved in ongoing advocacy work with the CRTC to ensure the effective implementation of the Online Streaming Act, both through our active participation in the ongoing public consultation process, particularly on the strengthened provisions regarding the obligation and manner of consulting our communities, not to mention our structuring contribution within a dedicated mechanism, the CRTC CLOSM discussion group. Thank you very much for inviting us to discuss the prospects offered by the Bloc Québécois Bill C-354. Point of order, Madam Chair? Madam Chair, just a point of order. We're trying to hear our witnesses, and there's a lot of chatter around the table.
Names were going up on the round.
D'accord. Merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Madame la Présidente, j'ai simplement indiqué.
Madam Chair, I was just saying that there was a lot of chatting happening around the table, and it was hard to focus on the witness. Thank you.
You could, everyone chatting, please take it outside, because I think we're finding difficulty focusing. Thank you very much.
Grand merci de votre invitation à venir.
Thank you very much for inviting us to discuss the prospects offered by the Bloc Québécois Bill C-354. This bill would amend the CRTC Act to require the CRTC to consult the Quebec government on its cultural specificity before carrying out its mission and exercising its powers over aspects of the Canadian broadcasting system, which we welcome. The fact that Quebec would be able to exercise a right of review before the Commission on its cultural specificity would have the effect of raising the importance of protecting and promoting the French language, which would also be beneficial to us. The FCCF is asking the CRTC and the government to ensure that the measures taken to support the French language have a greater impact, from support for French language production to the discoverability of our cultural content. Our elected representatives, including yourselves, have just begun work on modernizing the Official Languages Act to strengthen its obligations. The goal of achieving substantive equality of the official languages has been renewed, and we must act. In 2024, in light of the challenges facing the future of the French language and culture around the world, and ahead of the next Francophonie Summit scheduled for October in Paris, Canada must show leadership. This bill would make a significant difference. As representatives of the vital cultural sector, we've come to tell you about the importance of deleting the passage in the bill that would mean that, like Quebec, the other provinces would be called upon to declare their francophone market to the CRTC. This is simply impossible. We must do away with this misguided idea and ensure that our groups, which are representative of francophone communities on these issues, are appointed instead. Our mandates are legitimate, our representation structure is duly constituted, and we have the necessary expertise. We have a proven track record in guiding the development of public policy in support of the francophonie. We are the only stakeholders in a position to exercise our competence in terms of knowledge of the realities on the ground. Thank you for agreeing that our groups are in the best position to inform the CRTC of the needs of French-speaking minority communities. The choices our country is about to make in support of our language and culture will be more decisive than ever for the future and for the influence of the diversity of our cultural expressions here and around the world. Thank you for listening. It's a great pleasure for me to report on your discussions and answer your questions.
You could elaborate on what you didn't finish when you asked the question. Thank you very much. I now go to the Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes. Who is going to speak?
C'est Madame Roy qui va parler.
Madame, okay, sorry, Madame Roy. Please begin for 5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, committee members, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us to appear before you today with our colleagues from the Fédération culturelle canadienne-française. My name is Liane Roy, and I'm accompanied by our Director of Communications, Mr. Serge Quinty, who is with you in the room and will be able to answer your questions. The FCFA is the national voice of 2.8 million French-speaking Canadians living in minority situations in 9 provinces and 3 territories. Our organization leads a national network of some 900 French language organizations and institutions across the country. Our communities are determined to live in French, and every day they work to do so. Over the years, we have invested in a number of areas and sectors necessary to the vitality of our francophonie. The media and audiovisual space is one of them. We have developed a network of French language community radio stations. We have an educational television station, TFO, which is present not only in Ontario, but also in Manitoba and other provinces. We're constantly working with Radio-Canada to increase the reflection of our communities, not only in the content of regional stations, but also in national programs and news. In recent years, 2 of our country's major laws have been modernized. The FCFA took a leadership role in the modernization of the Official Languages Act. At the same time, we supported the FCCF's work to ensure that the new Online Streaming Act adequately take into account the realities and needs of our communities. One of the major gains in this respect is the addition to the Online Streaming Act of Section 5.2, which obliges the CRTC to consult official language minority communities when making decisions that have an impact on them. This section is absolutely essential because, and I admit, the CRTC's consideration of our realities over the years has been uneven and, in many cases, unsatisfactory. For 18 years now, there has been a CRTC official language communities discussion group, which essentially is just that, discussion. It's not an advisory body. In fact, since October 2023, our communities have been calling for this group to be transformed into a full-fledged advisory committee. This transformation is necessary in view of the CRTC's new obligations under the Online Streaming Act. All this to say that we agree that it's important for the CRTC to consult much more systematically on the realities of the country's French-speaking markets, including Quebec's cultural distinctiveness. However, one part of Bill C-354 is problematic, and that dealing with Francophone markets outside Quebec. As worded, the bill calls for consultation with provincial governments on the realities of these markets. To be quite frank, the sensitivity these governments may have towards the French-speaking community is of variable geometry. Some governments have difficult relations with their Francophone communities. Francophone and Acadian communities, and more specifically, the organizations that make them up, are in a much better position to describe the realities of Francophone markets to the CRTC, as required by the bill. The FCFA, the FCCF, provincial and territorial Francophone organizations, the Alliance nationale de l'industrie musicale, and the Alliance des producteurs francophones du Canada have all been part of the CRTC OLMC discussion group for 18 years now. This demonstrates that the CRTC understands and recognizes their legitimacy to speak on behalf of Francophone and Acadian communities. We therefore respectfully ask you to amend Bill C-354 so that Francophone and Acadian community organizations, and not provincial governments, are the CRTC's primary interlocutors for reporting on the realities of Francophone markets outside Quebec. Thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Now we go into the question and answer section, and I think we're going to only have time for one 6-minute round. And so we begin with the Conservatives, Mr. Good.
Sorry, are we not hearing from the other witness?
Oh, so I'm sorry. Gosh, this is what happens when you don't get any sleep. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think we only have 2 people who presented, so we're now getting into question and answer. So now I begin with Mr. Good for the Conservatives for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci aux témoins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Ms. Hunt, you talked about a discussion group. Can you tell me more about this, please? No, that's what we would want. The discussion group is only a discussion group, and since October 2023, community organizations would like for this discussion group to become an advisory group. Thank you, Ms. Roy. Earlier, we spoke with the CRTC. They seem to be a little tepid about the bill, if I can say it this way. They don't want to give an advantage to the Quebec government. And they don't want to do this for any other government, provincial government, either. They invite anyone to send in a brief that includes governments, associations throughout the country, and they don't put additional weight to a brief from a government. Have you noticed that this is, in fact, the way the CRTC does things? Answer. Thank you for the question. The CRTC does like to carry out consultations and public hearings. What's important for us would be to have one-on-one discussions with the CRTC. I will ask Serge, Director of Communications, to comment because he has more experience on this matter. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Gould. When we meet with the discussion group, the message shared by the CRTC is that consultation done by the CRTC is in fact done through public hearings. And so we prepare ourselves for these hearings. There's a public file, and then they make a decision. The CRTC has obligations through the new Broadcasting Act. It must consult communities that might be impacted, and of course they have to take positive measures because of the Official Languages Act. And so they could carry out other consultations upstream. For both witnesses, including Ms. Roy, the CRTC wants to maintain its independence regarding decisions. Consulting governments before might create issues with that. Do you have any comments, Ms. Roy? I believe that Mr. Quinty was quite clear in his answer. Then I will ask Mr. Quinty. The CRTC seemed uncomfortable with receiving a government brief because of its independence and its impartiality. Do you agree with the CRTC's position? Answer. It's a quasi-judicial tribunal. And so, consultations are held through public hearings and having public files, and they make decisions based on all of this. This is what's been in place for years. And now there's a new Online Streaming Act, which includes consultation requirements, and they are not limited to OLMCs. It includes Indigenous people and diversity groups. The CRTC is currently attempting to see how to adjust to these new requirements. That's why the FCFA and the FCCF worked hard. And with the discussion group, we talked about this new way of doing things and how things need to change. There are new consultation obligations with the new Broadcasting Act. And so that's what our position is, Mr. Gould. So seeing the CRTC evolve, 41 seconds, this is something that organizations would welcome as a quasi-judicial tribunal. It should be able to adjust better to the future. Thank you.
Now go to the Liberals. Talib Noor Mohammed. Talib, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup d'être ici avec.
Thank you very much for being with us today. You're aware of consultations that the CRTC does with Quebec and other Francophone communities throughout the country. They stated today that they have never received complaints regarding how many consultations they carry out. Can you give us examples where Francophone communities felt like they were not heard? I can't speak on behalf of Quebec because the FCFA works with minority Francophone communities. We have been saying for years that the discussion group needs to be changed so that we have more targeted discussions. We meet with groups that have expertise in the different provinces and territories. And it's been the same groups for 18 years. The fact that it's been the same groups for 18 years shows how legitimate these groups are to the CRTC. And so, yes, for years we've been saying that these meetings are unsatisfactory, that the group needs to be more than it is currently, and given the obligation for consultations that the CRTC now has, it's essential that that group evolve to better equip the CRTC to do its work. Question. With new legislation, they will carry out consultations, and they stated today that they want to improve the consultation process. They've also said that consulting with Quebec and the provinces is something that happens frequently. They don't close the door to Quebec or Francophone communities. It's difficult for me to understand how this bill will help improve the consultation process. How they can hear voices from Quebec better. They've stated that they respect these voices, that they hear from these different groups frequently. And so it is difficult for me to understand how this bill will help. Answer. I don't have information on the CRTC's process with Quebec. I can speak to the rights of Francophone communities in minority situations, and with the new Online Streaming Act, we seek to consult these groups further and see how to do things. You can look at section 5.2, which is very interesting. It has improved the quality of the process that needs to happen. There will be opinions that will be heard. They were concerned of the weight of these opinions, and the FCCF and the FCFA raised the matter of low Francophone representation culturally. We have seen things that are encouraging, but there are still improvements, and we would like to know more. We want to know what the impact would be of decisions that have already been taken or that are about to be taken on the rights of our communities. This is what we will focus on. And I can also say that during a public hearing, during the consultation process, which is ongoing, there were moments that representatives of Francophone minority communities felt like issues from minority groups were not entirely heard.
So, Martin, you good?
Le tour de parole de mon collègue Talib, mais je peux
no,
bien.
I know you. Are you good?
Je peux certainement prendre son.
It was my colleague Talib's turn, but I can take his time if you want.
I have one thing. Tout ça, c'est bien entendu.
This is all heard. But adding something like this, I don't think that it would change the way the CRTC will carry out its consultations. But the CRTC's mandate with C11 will improve the process. I think that that's the way to reach the goals that you are seeking.
Mr. Noor Mohammed, Matin, 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je veux juste...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state that I am impressed by Mr. Noor Mohammed's French, and I would like to commend him for taking his 6 minutes and speaking entirely in French. Congrats. I'm pleased to see all three of you here. We've met before in different contexts, and I've had the opportunity to speak with some of you regarding concerns on consulting the provinces. Ms. Henri Cadieux, in your opening remarks, and perhaps you can say more about this, but you stated that you believe that the consultation mechanism is not good only for Quebec, but is beneficial for French in Canada. Can you elaborate, please? Because I find this point of view very interesting. Quebec defends French and has the tools to defend French, and how it has an impact outside of Quebec. Answer. We are concerned by the complexity of issues regarding protecting and promoting the French language, given its decline and given other indicators on things shared by Radio-Canada and concerns regarding cultural content. We need to wake up and understand the importance of these issues. And you have decided to modernize the Official Languages Act. You have supported positive measures, and they need to lead to concrete actions that can be measured. And so do not stop at hearing about positive measures, but really wait to hear about the positive impacts. There are many steps left, and this is something we will continue to share. Ms. Roy, I can see that your headphones are facing the right direction. I thought you had them backwards. This is a bit of an inside joke between the two of us. You talked about the consultation process and the link between the CRTC and your organization, especially when there are hearings, and how it is systematic. How are the interlocutors decided? Is it always the same organizations? How do we know that the right organizations are going to be speaking to the CRTC? Answer. As I mentioned, and as the other witnesses mentioned, there is a committee of the CRTC with OLMCs. It's a discussion group, as I mentioned. And so there are discussions on upcoming hearings. And during these meetings, it is sometimes recommended to include certain organizations. Now, I'm not a part of that discussion group, and so I will ask Mr. Quinte to answer your question and give specifics. Thank you for the question, Mr. Champoux. I would like to make the distinction between public hearings. Well, for that, the CRTC sends out calls and notices for consultation, and civil society, anyone, in fact, can participate. And it's not necessarily people that are invited. You have to submit your request by the deadline. After that, there is the CRTC OLMC group, which includes provincial and territorial francophone groups that are members of the FCFA and the FCCF, the Producteurs francophones, the Association Musicale, and another group are part of that discussion group. But currently, that is not a consultation body, and that is what we're trying to change. Thank you very much. I think I have about 30 seconds left, Madam Chair, and I would... Oh, 6 seconds more than I thought. I would like to thank Ms. Roy and Ms. Henri Cadieux and Mr. Quintet. They did not hesitate to share their concerns with us regarding other provincial governments being part of this bill. This has allowed us to have open discussions, and this could be a relevant amendment for francophone groups outside of Quebec to be consulted. And so the Bloc Québécois would be more than welcome to examine such an amendment. Thank you.
I now go to, for the NDP, Ms. Nikki Ashton. Nikki, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à nos témoins.
Thank you very much to our witnesses today. I'll start with you, Ms. Roy. As president of the FCFA, we see that there's a decline in French, and the tools that we have with Bill C-13, and I'm proud to have worked with the former official languages minister in order to have a better bill. This does not change the need to move forward with political will to put an end to the decline of French. Now let's come back to C-354, which states that the CRTC must consult provincial governments other than Quebec regarding francophone markets. I would like to know what you think about this. Do you believe that someone like Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick or Daniel Smith in Alberta, do you believe that they seek to protect francophone communities with all that we've seen from their governments? Do you believe that an amendment can be made so that francophone communities are heard by the CRTC, that this is essential for protecting the rights of these communities and allows them to act to stop the decline of French in our country? Thank you for your question, Ms. Ashton. And thank you again for all the work that you did on C-13. And we believe that it's not only a matter of the provinces, it's about the interlocutors and how they can talk about the distinctiveness of Francophone culture. Organizations would be much better suited in the provinces to identify the needs of the different groups. When we talk about Francophone markets, we need to understand the issues in our communities, as you stated. It's important to understand and define a Francophone market. I'll give the floor to the Communications Director, Serge Quintet. To answer your question, Ms. Ashton, there are two things that I would say. Firstly, it's clear that the relationship between OLMCs and their governments can vary greatly between one province to the next and between governments even. These organizations have been part of the OLMC CRTC group for 18 years and have seen different governments. Some governments were more open to the francophonie, some were less open, some had easy relationships, others not. It is clear to us that our organizations are better placed to talk about the different realities. Another thing that I would add is that we don't want there to be a conflict of interpretation between the Online Streaming Act and the bill that you are currently studying, because if we say in the Online Streaming Act that the CRTC must consult OLMCs, and that in C354 we say that they must consult provincial and territorial governments, there might be an issue on interpretation to see which group has priority, and that's what we're trying to avoid now. Thank you for the answer. My next question is for Ms. Henrique-Adieu. Are you satisfied with the CRTC's consultation process? I know you've already talked about this, but can you share how things are now and why it's so important to make improvements? We are actively listened to. We are able to look at the entire sector in Canada in all its different dimensions. The process is not finished. There's an important step, as Serge stated. It's the CRTC that lets us know when consultations are going to happen. And we met on March 25th during a discussion group meeting, and we were told that we would be rather pleased soon and that we would feel important because there was important public consultation that was going to be carried out and that it would be focused on us. And the information has been updated on the website. They talk about summer 2024, that there's a special activity to reinforce the CRTC's capacity in official languages. But it does not talk about public consultation specifically. And so we shared concerns regarding this diluted language. But we see that they seek to consult us. We're talking about consulting us on Section 5.2 that reinforced or strengthened the way that we would be consulted and gives details on how we must move forward. We are eager to see what this step will look like in Audible.
We must wrap up now. We've gone over time on this. And answering questions and sharing with us the insights and wishes. And so what I would like to, I was going to suspend this meeting to go in camera, but I have been informed that many members of this committee feel that we could seek to get the drafting instructions on the study on the media via email. And so, because we do not have a lot of time left to finish the drafting instructions as we had hoped. So is everyone in agreement that we do that? Because if you are, then I will move that this meeting be adjourned. Pardon?
If we do that, it's helpful to set a deadline.
Yes, yes, I will. So if everyone's in agreement to send it in by email, we need to set a deadline for that. Does everyone have a deadline in mind? Yes, Michael?
What if there's a dispute in drafting instructions? Like if I send one in and just say, for example, Kevin doesn't agree with that, how do you deal with that? You just send a message back?
Well, the analysts will look at the drafting instructions. If they are what we heard at committee, then that would obviously be input. And then when we look at the draft, we can say, no, we don't like this, we don't like that. So that's one way of doing it, and it would save a lot of time. What I'm looking for is a deadline for submitting these drafting instructions. I thought you were going to suggest a deadline, Mr. Coteau.
How about Friday?
This coming Friday, is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
All right.
I can do
What
two
date
things at
is
the
that?
same
Because my
time.
brain is not working very well right now.
Sorry, Chair, I do have a question of clarification. My understanding is that the report for Safe Sport was supposed to be tabled on Monday. I also understand that that did not happen. I'm just wondering if you can update this committee as to what is going on.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm really sorry. I'm not functioning at all. Sorry, what were you saying? My thing was off. So what were you saying?
Sorry, I'm just curious as to where things are at with tabling the Safe Sport study.
It was to be tabled today. I logged in to table it, and you saw that orders of the day were dispensed with, and so we had to move to actually the orders of the day, and so I will have to do it tomorrow. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente,
Yes, Martin?
on n'a pas terminé.
We're not, we haven't decided of a deadline. I think Friday doesn't give us enough time. Perhaps next Friday, I think that would give us enough time.